Israel was not created because Europeans decided to randomly go to the Middle East to start oppressing people, which is what I had been told before, because the left has this really twisted way of telling history to where anyone and anything that is remotely related to Europe becomes this like cartoon supervillain type of thing.
No, that's basically how it happened. You can call it a cartoon villain type of thing all you want, but that's basically how it happened. They decided on land to occupy, and they went, took their power and military, and occupied it without the permission of the people that were already there. What else would you call that? So this is what a person that is clearly very uneducated and very untrusting of one political side and gets most of their information from one political side, this is usually the outcome of that. This person left the left, and that has become kind of a very embarrassing, or I guess cringy thing to say. So the fact that this person is out and proud about it is also a bad sign.
In my last video, I talked about how I became a leftist and why I left the left. And during my time as a leftist, like I said before, I was very anti-Israel. Israel wasn't in an officially declared war when I was a leftist and when I was in university, but if it had been at the time, I would have been like a lot of these ignorant protesters that we're seeing on the news who are camping outside of their classes defending the fictional country of Palestine.
The protests aren't to support Hamas, they're to support innocent human beings who do not deserve to suffer. How would you feel if you were dropped into Gaza, not able to escape, knowing that you're going to be bombed any day? How would you feel? Do you have to be put in this circumstance in order to feel sympathy for a human being? Are you so full of yourself and Western greed that you can't see that other humans suffer so we can live in comfort? This is an I love you Israel love letter, and I hate the left, so I'm going to stand against the left type of video. This person basically uses the whole argument that this situation isn't exactly like this situation, so I should just not trust the left anymore.
For some reason, I ended up watching this video, and it was of a black South African man who had lived through much of apartheid, and what he was saying was that any comparison between Israel and South Africa is completely ridiculous. Look at what happened in South Africa, and let's contrast this with Israel. In Israel, Arab Muslim doctors can treat Jewish patients and vice versa. Hospitals there are not segregated. Jewish and Arab teachers teach both Jewish and Arab students in the same schools. The schools there are not legally segregated. There are no legally segregated restaurants or bathrooms. And not only can Arab Israelis vote in elections, but there have been Arab members of Israeli government since the country was founded in 1948. If you actually look at the laws in Israel, you won't find one that says you can't live in this neighborhood, or you can't have this job, or you can't serve in government because of your race. That was what happened in South Africa, but that was not and is not happening in Israel. Watching this video at the time, I felt very confused afterwards. This was around the time I started questioning things on the left. And after doing a bit of research just to verify that because it was true, I realized that this was just another lie that I had been told. Nothing that I had been told about Israel was true.
Just because the Israel-Palestine conflict isn't exactly like the apartheid in South Africa, which they share a lot of overlapping and similar things. The fact that this person uses that as a reason is very upsetting to me. This person also has the I am from the West and an outsider to suffering of the Middle East, so I just look at them through an outsider lens type of thing, and it's really annoying and frustrating and honestly dehumanizing. A situation shouldn't have to mirror another situation in order for it to be taken seriously. It should just be a situation that should be taken seriously.
But October 7th changed my mind and pushed me to dig further and do some more of my own research. When I woke up on October 7th and saw the horrific images and videos being posted from the Hamas attack, I didn't really understand what was happening. So I started doing my own research, and one of the first things I discovered that I did not know before October 7th is that the West Bank and Gaza are really in practice two separate countries from Israel.
So I want to be charitable and say that this person didn't do the research right, or they're just straight up lying. But the Gaza Strip and the West Bank are two Palestinian territories that were part of Mandate Palestine and were captured by Israel during the Six-Day War in 1967. There are over 5 million Palestinians combined living in the two territories. The Gaza Strip is 140 square miles of land located in the southwest corner of Israel, along the coast of the Mediterranean Sea. It also shares a border with Egypt to the south. The West Bank is another area of land located within the country of Israel, but it is much larger than the Gaza Strip at 2,173 square miles. The West Bank stretches across the eastern border of Israel along the west banks of the Jordan River and most of the Dead Sea, thus how it received its name. The holy city of Jerusalem is considered by international law as part of the West Bank, with East Jerusalem being claimed as the capital of both Israelis and Palestinians. In 1967, Israel, Egypt, Jordan, and Syria were involved in a military struggle, most commonly known as the Six-Day War. Up until that point, the Gaza Strip had been under Egypt's control and the West Bank under Jordan's. However, after the Six-Day War, both the Gaza Strip and the West Bank were seized by Israel. So, these two territories are technically belong to Israel because they occupied land that didn't belong to them. I seriously don't like to be mean to people because I think everybody has the opportunity for growth, but this person is really starting to piss me the fuck off.
So why? Why did this happen? Because the apartheid accusation doesn't even apply to people who are living in a different country with their own government, with their own laws, with their own borders. So what was the goal of this attack? So again, I did some research, and my goal in doing research wasn't necessarily to back up one side or the other. It was just to learn the truth. I read history from the perspective of both sides. I listened to interviews from both Hamas and the Israeli government. I looked into policies and laws, and I watched as much footage from October 7th as I could. And that probably wasn't great for my mental health. No, it definitely wasn't great for my mental health, but I wanted to understand as deeply as possible what was going on. Here's what I learned.
You talk about all of this trauma that you've been exposed to by having to research this stuff and all of that, but how do you think the children that live in Gaza and Palestine have all been suffering and being traumatized and being left without parents and dying? All of these children, these stories that you hear of children losing their limbs, losing their whole families, dying in a car surrounded by their decaying loved ones, only to be bombed, never to be rescued. And you can think only of the people on October 7th. You can't think of the constant suffering that these people are still going through because human beings can't come together and find a solution where humans don't suffer. And you only think about the suffering of one side, usually the side that's already in power or the side that has had historical traumas put onto them and now they get a pass. That's not how the real world works. You don't get to be genocided and then get to have your free pass at a genocide for another race. That's not how it works. All of these stories have been posted on social media, and people have been constantly being exposed to that and have been protesting for this to stop. This type of person also believes that apparently history started on October 7th, and because a national tragedy happened to a Western state, that means that automatically the other guys are the bad guys. Just to be clear, so nobody comes at me, I obviously condemn Hamas for what they've done. That's not what this conversation is about. But the fact that we always look at a situation from a Western lens is the bigger problem. We always look at a national tragedy when it happens to us and then villainize the other side because we never ever see how we might be the instigators. And that's the situation here. But this person is looking at it through a Western lens, like a lot of people do, to try to justify the murdering and the horrifying conditions that people are forced to live in right now. That's the difference. It is an apartheid state. People in Palestine can't get out of where they are. They're being held hostage in this open air prison where they're being murdered, ethnically cleansed, and babies are being killed. But this person's justification is because it doesn't quite resemble the South African apartheid, because things need to be exactly the same in order to look at things with humanity. I don't know. Another problem with this person is that they talk from only one perspective, which is the Western side, the Israelis, of course, and how Palestine and Israel are two separate states and they have two separate governments. This person said that they did research. I don't know how much. I don't know if they know how countries work or what imports and exports are. But when a country doesn't have a lot of financial stability or support and there's another country blocking off humanitarian aid, like imports and exports, get it? That's how countries work. And that's what creates conflicts and wars. Alongside, racism and the need to be controlling over other nations and power and greed.
Like most of these students, I didn't know anything about the Middle East, anything about the history of Israel or the conflict. I just knew that I was supposed to be against Israel because other people told me to.
If you're coming to conclusions about things because people tell you that something is bad, that's not good. It makes you look empty-headed.
I think the biggest surprise that I discovered when looking into what happened was that Hamas was not just some terrorist group that happened to be in Gaza. No, Hamas was the elected official government of Gaza, and they murdered almost 1,500 Israelis and took 100 more hostage.
She's also somebody that uses the same argument about how Hamas was voted in. Like there was that many options for them to choose from in a broken government in Palestine. I have a feeling that she didn't do any research on the Palestinian side of things, because when there's a broken government, there isn't this thing called democracy. It's not really a thing. Also because people that live in Palestine have been oppressed for decades. Of course, they're going to vote in somebody that they might think is going to bring change to their suffering, because Israel has been occupying and completely colonizing Palestine for decades. Palestinians were forced out of their homes where they created lives, had children, was just stolen from them by people who said that it was okay because this bad thing happened to them. So because this bad thing happened to them, they went and did a bad thing to other people that they view as lesser than them. You as a black person, I cannot believe that you do not see it this way. Western countries go in all the time and steal and colonize. They've done it for centuries. It has nothing to do with this cartoon supervillain. Western civilizations colonize other civilizations all the time for a means of capital and also because of racism.
The only reason I held this belief was because I was told it was a view that I was supposed to have as a black woman. When I was a social justice warrior, I viewed everything through this oppressor lens. An entire demographic would be given one of these two labels, and I never questioned why. I was told that Israel was a racist apartheid state that was oppressing the brown Palestinians that lived there, and that all of this conflict was because the Palestinians were fighting back against their oppressors, the evil white European colonizers. And I was told that this was the exact same thing that happened in South Africa during apartheid. So I, as a black woman, was supposed to support the Palestinians in their fight against oppressive Israelis. And I embraced this because I didn't know how to think for myself.
You still don't quite know how to think for yourself, but hopefully that will come with time.
The real history is that after World War II, after the Holocaust, when Jews were being massacred, really genocided for being Jewish, many of them fled and moved into the land called Palestine.
You gotta love how she says move instead of it being like Jews immigrated to Palestine and they forced the people that were living there to leave. They didn't move to a vacated spot. But of course she's going to leave out those details because that doesn't look good for the argument, does it?
It's really important to note that at this time, it was not an independent Palestinian state. It was land that was under a British mandate that was created after the defeat of the Ottoman Empire after World War I.
She says how it was not an independent Palestinian state, which is just not true. Now, the British mandate thing is a thing, but she is making it seem as if Palestine never existed until the British mandate. But that British mandate was to basically move Jewish people into the Palestine area and make it a place for them. The British mandate had nothing to do with Palestine not being a state on its own. Palestine existed, and because obviously Western states have more power, they came in and took over the very small governmental power that the Palestinians obviously held. Because of European power, obviously, the Zionist movement started to push Jewish people immigrating into this area where 90% of Palestinian Arab natives made up. The British mandate that she's talking about, I assume, in 1923, and also lasted until 1948, is this mandate that basically moved Jewish people in and pushed the native people out. And her justification for this, like many other people's justification for this, is because the Jewish people were going through a very hard time, which is very true and very upsetting and sad. But that doesn't mean that they get to go and do what they did, which was coming in and disrupting another society like this, and disrupting it, displacing millions of people in the process, killing thousands. Obviously, if people are invading your home and what you knew to be your home, you would fight back. You, from an American perspective, I know that you would not be okay with somebody coming into your home and taking what's yours, like how Westerners and Europeans have done for centuries, coming and claiming things that aren't theirs. They didn't have the power to fight back. In 1939, Britain had already had 30,000 troops in Palestine. People were being killed, homes demolished, bombed. Why do you not care about the other side? Why is the other side never considered? Because they're brown. But you're also brown, which is very interesting. So you've been propagandized to believe that Western civilization has the right to colonize another civilization if they see fit. That's not right.
There has never been an independent Palestinian state. But anyways, Jews were starting to move into Palestine, and they were buying land, building businesses, building communities, and they were being murdered and attacked there too. And it really shouldn't be surprising that the Jews who lived there wanted to build borders between themselves and the people who wanted to kill them, whether these people were Nazis or Muslim terrorists living in Palestine. Every single war that has happened with Israel has been initiated by the Arab Muslim majority countries around Israel. And Israel has worked and done its best to defend itself so that the Jews who live there don't get murdered like they did during World War II. Now, the British mandate ended with the proposal to create two states, Israel and Palestine in that region. If both states had accepted the two-state solution, there would have been an independent Arab Muslim majority Palestinian state, and there would have been a Jewish majority state. And any Arabs that wanted to stay in Israel and the Jewish majority state would have been allowed to stay there. They have their own governments, they have their own borders. And the people who live in West Bank and Gaza are not Israeli citizens, and they don't want to be. Now, there are Arabs who live in Israel, are citizens of Israel, and like I said before, are treated the same as Jewish Israeli citizens. And in fact, a lot of them were actually very negatively impacted by October 7th. There are quite a few Arab Israelis who were taken hostage or killed during the Hamas attack.
Of course, the Jews are always the poor victims here because of the Holocaust. Because of the Holocaust, the Jews get a pass on everything. The Jews can't be the terrorists here. Of course, it has to be the other ones that are the terrorists. And honestly, this is the same mentality that America had post 9/11, where people from the Middle East also experienced discrimination and racism because America said that they were the bad guys and that we didn't do anything wrong. Her mentality about October 7th is literally like that. Again, all violence is horrible, but when you only look at one side and not wonder why the other side might have also caused violence, then we're never going to reach a solution as humanity. You can't just one side something, especially if the other side has more of power and control. Just surrender, Palestinians. Just surrender to our demands because we're the ones in control. It's difficult to say what would necessarily end the conflict that Israel started so long ago, but it is totally unfair to say that all Palestinians want to attack Jews or want them to suffer. A lot of them say that they want a one-state solution. Some of them have said in the past that they wanted a two-state solution. To be honest, it doesn't really matter what one Palestinian says from the next Palestinian. Each person's going to have a different take on this, and it's a complicated situation that needs a lot of people coming together to come up with a solution. But the current way things are, Israel has taken control of land that is not theirs and has continued to oppress and kill for decades. This person is also extremely vague when discussing anything about criticizing Israel at all. It's clear that they don't really have much knowledge or education or have really researched the issues and conflict between Palestine and Israel.
Hamas and the majority of Gazan citizens who elected them into power and have kept them in power don't want Israel to exist. And they don't want Israel to exist because they want to kill the Jews who are living there. And Hamas has stated this explicitly, both in interviews and in their charter. The day of judgment will not come about until Muslims fight against the Jews. When the Jew will hide behind stones and trees, the stones and trees will say, "Oh Muslims, oh Abdullah, there's a Jew behind me, come and kill him." But that was then and this is now, right? A lot of people have claimed that Hamas has changed their views. They no longer want to kill Jews. No, that's not true. In 2018, a senior Hamas official said in a rally in Gaza, "We are looking forward to two important things which are within sight. The first is the cleansing of Palestine of the filth of the Jews, and their uprooting from it. This is within sight. 4 years, my brother. By 2022, we will be rid of them. The second thing is the establishment of the caliphate, after the nation has been healed of its cancer, the Jews."
Hamas is not Palestine. Stop using what Hamas says to justify this disgusting, abhorrent behavior from a government that believes that it deserves to exist just because a group of people occupy it.
Despite the constant threat of violence from its neighbors, Israel has managed to become the freest, most liberal country in all the entirety of the Middle East.
I wonder how Israel became the freest and most liberal country in the Middle East. I wonder how that became. Maybe because it got its power from European nations, Western nations like the US, like Britain. And it's interesting how you admire a country like that because it's probably more civilized compared to those other Middle Eastern countries. Do you not hear it when you say it out loud? Do you not hear the Western brain coming out? Do you not hear it? They're supporting Gaza and Palestine because it's called being a human being and not wanting to see people suffer.
But when you compare Israel to any of the other countries in the area, not only does Israel want to peacefully coexist with its neighbors while these other countries try to attack it, but it is the only country in the region that was founded on the ideas that people can and should live with freedom of religion, freedom of speech, property rights, all of these things that the surrounding Middle Eastern countries don't have. Morally, Israel is a better country than the ones around it that are still oppressing women and gays and religious minorities and keep starting wars. And this is why I defend Israel. The more research that I do into the region, the more confident I am that Israel needs to exist. And these surrounding Islamic theocracies, they need to be destroyed. So one of the questions that I get asked a lot by people who have done their research, understand history, and have some semblance of a moral compass is, why are so many people supporting Hamas? Especially, why are there so many woke, intelligent people, especially at our universities, who claim that they're advocating for women's rights and gay liberation, all of these social justice things, but they're also supporting Gaza, whose policies and culture are antithetical to what they want.
Despite religion, despite what they believe in, do you not hear how you're just like the colonizers and how they think? Because they think that if a specific nation doesn't think like Western nations, we gotta go in and fix it up. This has nothing to do with belief systems right now. It has to do with the fact that one nation is holding power over a group of people and causing immense suffering. It has nothing to do with politics. It has to do with human suffering. If you lived in the desperation that a lot of people in these experiences have had to, then yeah, you'd probably feel pretty desperate to want to cause harm to those people that are living in lavish luxury at the expense of you suffering. Again, obviously, more violence doesn't lead to a solution, but a person that is literally at their wit's end and cannot think of any other solution but to cause harm, they're going to cause harm.
Once the country of Israel was founded, the surrounding Arab states and the Palestinians attacked Israel, and they attacked Israel over and over again. So anyone who was living in Israel after these attacks started and supported the violence either left or was reasonably not allowed to stay and continued to attack Jews. But these attacks from Palestinians and from the surrounding Arab countries continued for the last 75 years.
Since October 7th, over 30,000 Palestinian people have been murdered by the actions of Israel. Babies, 14,000 babies have been murdered, starved. Children are being starved as we speak. And you are worried about the Israelis who are living in comfort and are being hidden away from the tragedies that their own government is committing right in front of them. You should be ashamed of yourself. You should be disgusted with yourself, and you need to go back and read and research again because you're wrong. You're just wrong on all of it. You're wrong. If you looked at this through a human lens and not through a power lens, then you'd see that you're wrong. Desperation can lead to violence. It can lead to people making decisions that they wouldn't if they had the basic necessities to survive. When you're deprived survival necessities, you're not going to think straight. You're not going to think clearly. You're going to think on basis of revenge. Not everybody is like that, but the people who occupy and are part of Hamas, they think like that. It's a complicated situation all around, but you have to look at it from a nuanced perspective because you have to think of the whys so we can understand, so we can find a solution. There's going to be more violence as long as we as humanity continue to neglect the needs of others and continue to step on others in order to benefit. That's what happens. And unfortunately, people are going to die because of it. People are collectively being punished and people are dying because of the decisions of a few. And this is what continuously happens when you have a government that doesn't consider everybody and only considers their beliefs. This is what happens when you have religion impact everything. Israel as a nation is believed to be a sacred state because of religion, because Jews are owed a sacred state. That's not how it should be. If people came and forced you out of your home, your only place of comfort, the only place that you know, and you just have to go somewhere else, wouldn't you become desperate at a certain point when you're being deprived of basic human rights? I'm sure that you would, but you'll never have to be put in that position because you were born in America, where we do have privilege compared to other countries. And it's literally that privilege that keeps you from seeing other people's situations. Israel is the bad guy. Israel stole land. They forced people to move from their homes and they killed people. Now, of course, there's going to be counter violence to that because retaliation is, of course, going to happen when someone instigates a war. But you can't just blame the retaliators and not blame the people that instigated it in the first place. You can't remove context because you think that one side are the victims and the other side are the villains. That's not how it works. Because Palestinians deserve to exist and they didn't deserve to have their land stolen. The Jewish people went through, of course, the worst atrocities ever, but Palestinians are now going through atrocities committed by a government that was trying to protect a group of people that went through atrocities. Palestinians are being genocided and you are on the wrong side of it. I hope that you can get out of it, but for right now it seems like you're trying so hard to cope with what Israel is doing. And if you would pay attention to any of the news around you, you'd see that Israel is being condemned more and more by the day. The people that look at you and support this are just as delusional and are trying to cope. There might not be any way to reach you, and that's honestly really sad. I don't want you to support babies being murdered, but it looks like you don't mind babies being murdered if they're Palestinians, which is kind of sick because babies are fucking babies. So you can keep supporting the IDF in their baby murdering ways, while the rest of us here in reality will keep supporting Palestine until they get the freedom and justice they deserve. Because no human being deserves to live in the conditions that the Palestinians have been forced to endure because of the IDF.